In everyone's personal or professional life, we've encountered a situation or a loved one that we know down deep is heading down a dark path that, barring intervention, will end terribly. Interventions that are painful, combustible, and can carry a deep price, especially for the person confronting a person in power that can punish their courage. Day after day, I sit here at this desk sharing assaults on norms in our democracy and find myself wondering if this madness is beginning to blur together for a weary public. A couple months ago, I used my time noting the 100-day mark of this Trump administration, trying to take stock of a breathless whirlwind where an axe was taken to our government and recriminations from a vengeful president were a daily occurrence. People that seemed better suited to reality TV were suddenly in charge of critical agencies, and the only thing more common, it seemed, than shredding the Constitution was the blatant self-enrichment. Well, as we enter July 1, I thought it would be important to remind everyone that we are not even at the 1/8 mark of this presidential term. If you consider the scope of damage that has been levied against the pillars of our republic, the lack of a check and balance from a Republican-controlled Congress, as well as the Supreme Court, and you consider that Trump is not even through the appetizer portion of his presidency, the shock of our reality should be replaced by urgency. Here, as a reminder, is a snapshot, and trust me, I could have done this for a full hour, but this is just an idea of what has already been exacted on our country. Trump, with the unconscionable backing of the High Court, asserted that Article 2 gave him unchecked power. When he talked about becoming a dictator on day one, we thought, hey, it's typical bluster from the guy. But he meant it, and he's acted accordingly. Armed with the freedom of never having to run for another election and the court's finding that he is immune from prosecution, he immediately pardoned every single insurrectionist, including those who on live TV beat up cops, desecrated the Capitol, and attempted to steal a free and fair election. He then gave a clearly compromised, unelected Elon Musk a chainsaw to gut the government without a scintilla of transparency. What followed would be comical if it wasn't so chilling. The FAA's regulatory oversight was cleaved. Air traffic controllers, of which we are already critically understaffed, they were purged. Chaos followed. Safety concerns and delays are the new normal. Nuclear safety was compromised when Elon blindly fired engineers, scientists, and techs who build, maintain, and guard our nuclear arsenal. The folks who protect us from terror attacks at the Department of Justice, the FBI, and cybersecurity were also summarily dismissed, even though DOJ apparently had no idea who did what. If another COVID happens, we will be far less equipped to handle. The heroes who saved countless lives at the Center of Disease Control and the National Institutes of Health, they were canned. And additionally, the White House pulled us out of the World Health Organization. The early warning team to identify a pandemic, they were shuttered. And for good measure, U.S. Department of Agriculture fired plant protection and quarantine staff. Listen, if the electric grid fails this summer, as many fear, the crisis will be compounded because this administration decided to fire linemen, engineers, and dispatchers who maintain our power systems. The long overdue infrastructure project, which was passed by the last White House, has not only been stalled by Trump, illegally, but the watchdogs charged with overseeing bridge safety and much more, they're gone. The EPA, who protects us from polluters, cares about our water quality, handles waste cleanup, pipeline ruptures, chemical and gas explosions, and oil spills, they've also been neutered. FEMA, who's the lifeline for devastated communities after disasters, has also suffered major layoffs. The president openly talks of dismantling the agency altogether, and for reasons unknown to me, decided last week to cut hurricane forecasters' access to satellite data as we're about to enter superstorm season. Well, remember what happened in the 2008 market crash, where an underregulated banking system was overlevered and millions of regular Americans lost their life savings. Trump has decided those were the good old days. And he's removed banking oversight. He fired the staff who were tasked with stopping bank failures and is encouraging financial market risk-taking. our president is actively trying to kneecap the independence of the Federal Reserve, and he believes that he should unilaterally determine interest rates regardless of economic factors. Trump has also used the Oval Office to, by multiple estimates, self-enrich himself and his family by at least $600 million in just a few months, while using his position to blackmail media companies for unflattering coverage, colleges if he deems them critical, and law firms if they had the temerity to represent people that are on his enemies list. The rule of law has, of course, been a huge casualty under Trump. The inspectors general, who are tasked with making sure governmental agencies are abiding by the law and using our tax dollars as directed, they have been crippled. The unavoidable message is that corruption will go unpunished. In his pledge to crack down on illegal immigration, he said he was going to go after the violent criminals. Left unsaid in that pledge was that masked agents in unmarked vans will be pulling people off of American streets and without due process, never giving them a day in court, notifying their families, and even finding themselves in prisons on continents that they had never stepped a foot on. Even when the courts demanded that these individuals return, the Trump White House refused, saying in so many words, they were above the law. We also saw moms getting snatched up on the school pickup line and dads being duped by our government to show up for an immigration hearing only to be grabbed and shipped to God knows where. Now, this White House wants to deport children born and raised in this country. We also saw this White House go back on our word to refugees given legal status from war-torn nations, including Afghanistan, for the guys who risked their lives working with our troops against the Taliban, only now to be sent back to a nation whose extremists promise to kill them and their families upon their return. That standard curiously doesn't apply to white South African farmers who Trump says are more deserving of American citizenship. I'll let you do the math. Millions of lives will be lost globally from Trump's decision to shutter U.S. aid, which fed the poorest kids, treated the most marginalized patients, and gave a path to survival for so many in the worst places on this globe. This was a celebrated agency that enjoyed bipartisan support. That was until Trump said, nevermore. We, of course, humiliated Ukraine for the world to see and then embraced an invading despot in Putin who routinely embarrasses our president by ignoring his pleas. In Gaza, as the humanitarian crisis spirals out of control, Trump talks of taking the contested land as U.S. territory and turning it into, his words, a Middle Eastern Riviera. He's also threatened to take over the Panama Canal, Greenland, and turn Canada into the 51st state. In less than 6 months, he's turned America from the most reliable defender of democracy into a friend of dictators, an unreliable ally, and an extortionist. His global tariffs have been conducted as if it was a child with an acute case of ADHD somehow pulled himself up in a chair to the Resolute desk. We have a cabinet where our Secretary of Health seems determined to make us sicker as a nation. For the first time in a generation, we have a measles outbreak, and RFK Jr., who lied under oath at his confirmation hearings, is populating the highest levels of critical agencies with quacks and conspiracists. Funding for medical research has been decimated, and somehow we have managed in a matter of months to go from the scientific envy of the world to a nation whose own government is waging a war on medicine and science. Our Defense Department has purged generals who put country before Trump, and the DOD is being run by a weekend anchor from Fox News who is a walking punchline. The head of the Department of Justice, he's an advocate for Trump ignoring court orders, and he supported the assault on the Capitol. He's running our Department of Justice. He presided over firing agents who led investigations into the rioters, and he has prioritized fealty to Trump above the defense of justice in America. He supports weaponizing the DOJ for political purposes, most notably dropping charges against the mayor of New York City for his cooperation in ICE raids as a trade-off. The lack of competency and integrity in this administration is objectively jaw-dropping. Trump has telegraphed with putting the military and National Guard on the ground in Los Angeles over the objections of its mayor and governor that there are no lines he will not cross when it comes to abuse of power. His big, beautiful budget is anything but. It confirms he's incapable of being a man of his word. His pledge of a balanced budget is going to add nearly $4 trillion of debt to our country. That's according to the Congressional Budget Office. And his promise not to touch Medicaid? Yeah, right. At least 11 million Americans, including children, the elderly, veterans, and the disabled, they will lose health coverage, all to fund a tax cut for the wealthiest Americans. Now, the Supreme Court, in their infinite wisdom, has decided that despite his unended criminality, his actions as president are beyond prosecution, and federal courts can no longer halt illegal abuses of power. Trump regrets that in his first term he allowed patriots in his administration to restrain his worst impulses. No such guardrails exist now. To the contrary, Trump wants to exact vengeance on any who held him to account. He wants to use the office of the presidency to line his pockets, and he wants to do whatever he wants to whomever he wants without annoyances like a constitution or separation of powers getting in the way. So far, the Supreme Court and a neuter GOP are giving him all the runway he wants, and we should all be very afraid. My friends, if this term were a horse race, we would now be approaching just the first furlong. It's the equivalent of just starting the second inning. We must avoid fatigue, normalization, and resignation. He is not making America great again. Long before he descended that gold escalator and announced his candidacy, we stood for things that our forefathers fought and even died for. Things like democracy, freedom, tolerance, and justice. They came at a great cost to an imperfect but always striving nation. Let's not sit back and hope he doesn't leave our nation unrecognizable by the time he finally leaves office. We can't afford that as a country, and we deserve so much better.